I have to, I mentioned chronic fatigue syndrome, and I've got calls already, and we haven't even opened the subject. Llewellyn King is here, my good buddy for many, many years, and the face of White House Chronicle. And on the line with me, Linda Tannenbaum, who is founder, CEO, and president of the Open Medicine Foundation. And Linda, Llewellyn emailed me and said, I got to tell you something, a topic. We got to talk about it. It's huge importance, especially to the African American community, but not exclusively, because it affects more than 20 million people worldwide. And from what I'm picking up, among Americans, how many folk are we talking about? And please define it. And good morning.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for having us on. And
Llewellyn is sitting right next to me, so he's right next to me.
Hello, Llewellyn and
Good
Joe.
morning.
Thank
Good
you
morning.
so much. This is so important to let the communities know about this disease because most people don't. And as Llewellyn told you about, I mean, there's upwards of over 2.5 million people in the United States that has this, and it affects everybody. It affects everybody. It affects all communities. And it can happen to anybody at any time. It can come on suddenly or it can come on gradual. And most people don't know what they have and don't have it validated what they have because doctors don't even have a clue of what this is. And so most people are considered crazy and lazy and depressed and by the medical community alone. And so we are really grateful that you're here to be able to let people know that we validate their disease and they truly have a disease that needs to be researched and needs to be validated by doctors, and symptoms can be helped. And there's people that are working on this, but we'd like to describe some of those symptoms through this broadcast, if possible, so that people know that if they feel this way, that they may have this disease.
All right, let me do this, and I want to do just that in a moment. But let me ask Llewellyn and bring him into this conversation. How is it that you got involved in this issue, Llewellyn King? I mean, I know you're multifaceted.
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I had a great friend many years ago, and she was extraordinary. She was an athlete. She was a competition-level squash player, and became very successful in journalism and then on Wall Street as an analyst. And I lost track of her for 30 years. And then I met her again. I'd heard she was ill, but I didn't know much about the disease, and I assumed she would get better. You assume people who are ill will get better. But she hadn't gotten better. She was in parlous shape, although she told me, been in worse shape. So being a journalist, I wrote a single article for my syndicated column about this friend of mine. Her name is Deborah Woroff. And I got hundreds of emails from this country and from around the world, all of which began, excuse me, thank you, saying thank you.
Yeah.
And it was quite amazing. And so I developed an interest in it, and I started reporting on it. Since then, I have made some YouTube on MECFS Alert, YouTube segments, little episodes, about 20 minutes each. I made 109 of them that are up on the web. This is a disease that can strike anyone, and the healthier you are is no defense. The very healthy are struck down. And often people, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but often people are struck down after physical exercise. Very healthy people. There's a young man in Atlanta who was an athlete. There's my friend who is an athlete. And now I have visited a lot of the sick, and it goes from the somewhat severe. Some people sort of go where they have no energy. That's the fatigue. But they can't do much. If they do a little, the lady I mentioned, Deborah, I had her right here on a Sirius XM program some years ago, and that was tired her out. She was in bed for 2 days.
And you're just doing an interview.
You're just doing an interview. Any exertion, tolerance of exercise is zero.
Now
tolerance of effort.
Let me bring Linda back in. Linda Tannenbaum, founder and CEO and of president of Open Medicine Foundation, which, by the way, is an independent nonprofit organization. What is well, let me go to the first question. Obviously, listening to Llewellyn, age is not a factor. This is not a problem of an older population, because your daughter came down with the disease.
Yes, she was 16 actually.
16 years old?
Yeah, she was 16, and then her life was in bed. Yes, she was, and it affects a lot of adolescents, and takes them out of school and takes them out of their living. And so, no, it affects any age actually, and we're starting to see it in younger children also. But it's very common in adolescents, and happens to be the largest number of the biggest reason for kids being out of school with long-term illness. It's just that it's not defined, and so they don't know that. So
they just can't deal with school. People can't deal with work. Some of them are confined to bed. Now, very extreme examples, they're totally bedridden. I've seen 2 cases where young men, in fact, although it's mostly, we think, a disease of women, it's very poorly understood.
What is the difference between chronic disease, this disease, this chronic fatigue syndrome, and depression? Who wants to answer that?
There is no relationship, but if you had it, you have every reason to be depressed. There is no known cure. Very few doctors treat it. It's a long-term association if a doctor does, and doctors nowadays don't have time to spend with patients, talking to them, examining. The terrible thing is very little is known. It is now called more often by its scientific name, Myalgic Encephalomyelitis.
You did it better than I didn't even try to do the scientific name.
As somebody who's done a bit of broadcasting, I know about the challenge of long words. We avoid them. This is a disease that is hidden in plain sight. It's common, and the terrible thing is what happens in families. If somebody is sick permanently, it is a tremendous strain on a family. Marriages fail, associations, friendships break apart, and of course the financial burden is incalculable. Some of the victims are living in cars, are among the homeless, not diagnosed, not knowing why they are in such parlous shape day in and day out. I get emails constantly that say things like, I pray that I will not wake up in the morning. That is pretty awful.
Linda Tannenbaum, let me ask you, how did it turn out with your daughter? And how long did you have? The 2-part question: how did it turn out with your daughter, and is it treated physically, psychologically, or both?
Well, I'm glad you're asking those questions, because those are the questions that doctors ask and patients ask, and this is a physical disease. It's a biological disease that needs the symptoms treated if possible. Maybe there's help with symptoms with sleep and with pain, and possibly some medication for fatigue. But there's no actual treatment for this disease. But it is not a depressive disease, and so antidepressants usually make people sicker, actually, even though doctors think that maybe it's depression. But it's not depression at all. People are upset that they're sick, of course, and they're grieving that they're sick and they have no life left. But it's not a depressive type of disease. And so if a person is treated properly, they're really just treated for their symptoms. And our daughter, we actually, for the first year when she was bedridden, she only got out of bed to go to doctors and went to 20 different doctors and tried everything possible to get her out of that state, and absolutely nothing worked, and nothing took the pain away, and she had severe pain all over her body. And however, being young, which is what we were told when she got it, was her best defense on this. And so she consistently got better after a couple years, and got a little bit better, and got out of the house a little bit, and then got a little bit better, got out of the house in a wheelchair, and then got a little bit better and got out of the house more. And over a 7-year period, she really improved enough to really start going back to school again, because she had missed high school. but she got to go back to school again. And today we're 12 years out. She's 29 years old, and she's able to live her life pretty comfortably right now. And however, relapse is extremely common, and the people who've done any follow-up on patients for years, and there's some doctors, pediatricians, who've followed adolescents, like my daughter, for years, they say over 85% fall off in their 30s and 40s and then stay there. So it is very frightening to know what might be ahead. But right now, we're blessed that she is doing okay and living her life. And so I'm able to do this and really try to push research to find some answers quickly.
Llewellyn, you wanted to comment on this part?
This is a disease that has been so ignored by the government. I do this channel on YouTube, and I say that its mission is to comfort the sick, inform the doctors, and shame the government. And what I mean by the latter is that not enough money has ever been spent. There's been a tendency to brush it on because it's so hard to diagnose. And the tendency to say, oh, it's psychosomatic, that means it's a disease of the mind. It's not. It's a disease of the body. I've seen the racked bodies. There's no question about it. It is there. It's in front. And then when you get to the poorer communities, people who have less resources, which is why I'm here with you today.
Yeah, because the African I don't even know if we've ever discussed this as many years as I've been doing this show.
It came up in a discussion with Linda Tannenbaum. We were out filming on this disease in California very recently, and Linda, my wife, who you know well, she said, what about the African American community? Why don't we see any African Americans at meetings?
Right.
And Linda, you pick it up, but you said, and it shocked me, that there simply isn't the reporting in the African American community. There aren't the doctors, and people who have the disease do not know that they have the disease. They're likely to be accused of being lazy or malingering, of putting it on, of pretending.
And these can become stereotypes in some demographics, right, Linda?
Sure, of course they can.
Yeah.
I mean, they can. And you see it we deal with a lot of the doctors and specialists, and they're not seeing the communities. They're not seeing African Americans come into the office, so they sometimes think, well, maybe it's not in their communities.
Right.
But it's not. It's just not known in the communities, and yet, of course, the symptoms are there, and the people are sick, and the people are hidden and homebound, and lose their jobs, and most are probably thought that they are not sick, and they are. They're horribly sick. It's just they're not defined by the local doctors. Most doctors do not know about this. So whatever doctors are in different communities, and they mostly do not know about this, and they're not trained about it in medical school because there's no way to diagnose it.
I do have one other question, and this goes to the question of cost. What is the cost of the medicine? Let me just simplify. What is the medical cost to an individual and therefore a family?
It is huge.
It's huge, and it's largely incalculable, in my thought. I don't know, Linda, you may have a different idea. And then there are a few experimental drugs which can go for like $50,000.
Oh, wait a minute. And I mean, when you say 50,000, 50,000 a year, 50,000 a month?
A year, I believe.
Wow.
Isn't that correct, Linda?
Yes, it is. Yes. And those are experimental drugs.
They're not known cures. There's Ampligen, Rituxan B, and other drugs that are being tried, and they're horrendously. No normal family in any community can afford them. Part of the drug crisis. There isn't any possibility, unless you're hugely wealthy, that you can even afford to be in the trials. You can't afford the drugs that might work, but they're not guaranteed. There is no magic bullet drug. You can go and get a drug for this or a drug for that. No drug for this disease has been developed, and the large pharmaceutical companies have not been inspired to put the effort into it. And neither, I might say, have the large foundations that sometimes support medical research.
It
is a strange disease in that it is so prevalent and so little understood and so little recognized.
Let me go to Atlanta. Alicia is calling from Atlanta, and as soon as I mentioned that we were going to have this discussion, she jumped on the phone. Go ahead, Alicia.
Hi. Good morning. I was diagnosed with CFS when I was about 19. I was in college at the time. I'm 52 now, but I was in college, and the doctor said when I went in, I was complaining about all these symptoms. I was exhausted all the time, just kind of out of the blue, and he said, because I was 19, he said, "Oh, you're probably out there having too much sex." That's what his response was to me.
Oh.
And I was a virgin, so it was kind of like, no, that definitely is not what the problem is, and he wasn't taking me seriously. He was just he was eventually fired, but, obviously he shouldn't have been in there. But then a female doctor was there one time. I just had gone in because I was still complaining about it, and she ran some tests and did different things, and she said that I had, they came back and it said something about Epstein-Barr, first of all, but it never got better. It was constant. I was still constantly tired all the time, and it probably lasted about 12 years, I would say, where I was just kind of always. And now I still have it, but I have a son. I'm a single parent, so I've got to, get up. But I'm like I could just stay. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you broke up there for a moment. You went.
Oh, sorry. It might be the street. No, but there's no day that I feel like I'm resting. How much or how little. It's all. Oh God! And I tell people I can sleep all day, all day.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, because you're breaking up and it's probably just going in and out. But I got the gist of it. Let me go back then, Linda Tannenbaum. I don't know if we got to it. What are the symptoms? Since we've got everybody's ear on this, what are the symptoms? And then I'm going to get to Rodney from North Carolina who has a question. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, there are probably over 60 different symptoms that people will log that they feel, and different patients feel different symptoms and also at different levels and different severity. But there's a few symptoms that help kind of define and diagnose when doctors do know about this that are more defined. And one of the what they call hallmark symptoms that is really prevalent in most, if not all, patients is what they call, the words are post-exertional malaise. And what that means is your symptoms get worse after any type of activity. And what's interesting about this is that this means any physical activity, literally walking or showering or brushing your teeth, or any mental exertion, any type of worry, any type of thoughts, any type of watching your TV or on the computer, or emotional if things happen in your life that are really traumatic and stressful. Any type of exertion whatsoever really sucks up the energy in your cells, and it's a really big problem with energy depletion in all over your body, in all your in all of your systems in your body.
All right.
The good thing is that it's not breaking down organs in your body.
Yeah.
So it's hard to define. But other symptoms that define it, and there are specific symptoms that define it when we're looking on the research side, so that we can make sure that we're looking at all the patients that have the same disease.
And I'm going to run. I got you. I'm going to run out of time.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. That's okay. Hold on.
Brain fog should be mentioned.
What is that?
Brain fog.
Fog.
Can't concentrate, can't read, can't write.
Rodney from North Carolina, our last question, and then I'll just ask. Then what should be our next step? Rodney, North Carolina, quickly, please.
Yeah, Joe, I was looking at, you always say look at things at a different view in the third ear. If he gets that and wins that there where he can take over them, other people better watch out because he going to do the same thing to all the other states.
Okay, that had nothing to do with what we were referring to. That goes back to the last caller. Let me give yes.
Joe, just the most important thing we can get out today are the symptoms, so that people know that they're really sick because they have these symptoms. Could I just say them real quickly?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So as Llewellyn said, brain fog is huge. Cognitive dysfunction, memory and concentration, and those types of problems. And what they call unrestorative sleep. So some people sleep all day, some people sleep a little bit, and when they wake up, they feel like they haven't slept at all. And that is very significant. And then they have difficulty maintaining an upright position. Their heart races and their blood pressure drops and they faint. And most people have to stay horizontal to feel okay. And then, of course, the total exhaustion and chronic pain. Many patients have chronic pain. So those particular symptoms are more diagnostic to doctors that know it, but there are many other symptoms, neurological and immune system and digestive system.
And Llewellyn King, final word from you, please, and on this issue. And thank you for bringing this to our attention here. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
My thought is a lot of research is needed and a lot of community work. People are suffering from this disease, and I've now put 10 years of research into it, or journalistic research. It is so little known, and there is nowhere for people to go. I have lots of emails about where can I find a doctor. Whole states have no doctors that have specialized in it. It is hugely important that the medical community, and that every community where there are activists recognize this disease. It's costing unbelievable suffering, but also, of course, it costs the nation financially. It costs families. It destroys families. And it is the monster we live with that we don't see with our own eyes, although it's right there in front of us.
Is there anything that we can put on our Facebook, our social media, before I say thank you, and is anything at all? If so, can you get that to our producers, and we'll make sure it's on our Facebook, and because as I always tell people, Llewellyn and Linda, I never know who's listening,
Right. No, I appreciate that, because if people want more information, if they could go to our website, they will find lots of information, so they don't feel alone and they don't feel isolated.
And the website
is OMF.NGO, Open Medicine Foundation. So it's OMF.NGO.
All right. Thank you both.
For more information.
We'll obviously
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Llewellyn. Appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Joe.
And
I
White
really
House
appreciate
Chronicles.
White House Chronicle on PBS and a lot of local stations.
And you're heading down the hall to do your thing on POTUS.
I do things on POTUS. Thank you, Joe. It's a joy to be on your show.